I don't think you realize this, but competitive Rocket League has changed more in these past few months than it has in so incredibly long. The state of the current Rocket League meta is so unbelievably chaotic. One month, a team could be on top of the world, and the next, they're struggling to keep up. Not having international competition for 2 whole years was basically a massive buildup of tension. And now that LANs are back, we're seeing all these styles clash together in a chaotic explosion of inconsistency. Let's take a look at the recent RLCS Winter Major. These are the top 6 teams in the world as of this tournament. 5 out of the 6 of them weren't even in the top 8 3 months ago. In fact, half of them didn't even qualify for the previous major. So what the heck is happening? How on earth are so many previously negligible teams suddenly popping up for contention as the best team in the world? Let's take a deeper dive. Just like many of the other dominant styles in today's age of Rocket League, the one I'm talking about today revolves around a particular aspect that many of us are already familiar with, so it's not necessarily a brand new idea. What actually makes it unique is the degree that it's emphasized. Version 1, I think, is a great example to look at for this because they went from a top 8 team in North America in the fall split to a top 6 team in the world in the winter split. That's a massive difference. Obviously, they had a roster move that helped them out, but I'd like to look more at the gameplay itself that changed. Let's compare the differences between the fall major in December and the winter major in March. Looking back at it, there definitely were plenty of goals that stemmed from things like counterattacks and 2v1 scenarios. 2 players would be storming toward the opponent's goal from a counterattack, while the third man is playing very safe and reserved as the last line of defense. That's kinda just how rotation works in Rocket League, to be honest. It's so common and there's not really anything special happening. These plays definitely were a common thing at the fall major, but there wasn't really much creativity with them. Well, at least not until now. In the RLCS Winter Major, there was a sudden huge difference. The amount of creativity that was brought to the table in 2-man plays like these was, in my opinion, more prevalent than anything else. Let's start by looking at version 1. Take a look at how they approached this specific scenario. This right here is a moment in one of their matches from October 2021, about 6 months ago. Gimmick on version 1 goes up for an aerial and plans to get at least another touch on it, likely a flip reset. Falling from the air and with low boost, he knows his options are limited here. But are they really? What Gimmick ends up doing is getting an extra little flip reset scoop at the end to push it past an extra defender, making it slightly harder to read for the opponents. It works out as he would have hoped, and V1 starts a slow and mostly unorganized attack on offense. It turned out decently well for them, but this isn't actually the best option in this situation. Let's jump forward some time to the recent RLCS Winter Major. Here, we have version 1 again. Com here is in a very similar scenario to before. He's gotten 1 touch in the air so far and is falling with the ball with low boost. He could do the exact same thing here and turn his car over and get a reset for a little extra scoop at the end. But this isn't the same team from 6 months ago. They're not going to do that anymore unless they have to. Instead, what Com does is leave it completely and use his teammate Beast Mode to help him out from underneath, which of course results in a much more powerful transition onto offense. Now, one last time, let's head back to that same play 6 months ago. Turns out, this same idea was totally possible in the previous scenario. They could have had Torment come in from underneath to help out, but instead, they left it to Gimmick alone, which resulted in something not quite as strong. Now apply this same idea of a teammate helping out from underneath to a situation on offense, and you've just added another deadly method of scoring to your repertoire.
For FaZe Clan, it seems as though every time a ball gets pushed across the midfield, there's a version 1 player ready, and Beast Mode himself, he's ready in game 3.
And what a touch from Torment off the inside of the ceiling, and Beast Mode takes it away. First killer and AJ, they're just too slow.
Obviously, this is by no means a brand new play, but it's something that was emphasized so much more than normal in the recent event. V1 wasn't the only team doing this either. You also saw teams like Team Queso and Furia doing this. The idea revolves around 2 players going for the same ball. It sounds basically just like a double commit on the surface when you put it like that. But if performed properly and with organization, you get the benefits of its unpredictability without the detriments that usually come with double commits. You may have seen my video a couple months ago in which I tried predicting which mechanics would be used more often this year, 2022. One of them was something I called the dummy play, which had to do with one player faking an aerial to create space for a teammate, while the other behind went for a completely normal shot, already knowing that their teammate would fake it. Again, like a controlled double commit. Shockingly, we already saw a near identical play to the one I showed in the video, executed by Furia. Another team that outperformed pretty much everyone's expectations at this event. So it was pretty interesting to see it evolve so quickly. To put a cherry on top of that, we saw Team Queso do literally the exact same thing later on, but even better. Instead of that first player just faking it and leaving, they actually demoed the defender midair in the process of the fake, turning it into just a more effective version of what we already saw from Furia. Similar to this, we also saw air dribble bump plays like these. When there's two players involved, it allows the bumper to be less picky about where they leave the ball behind them, since their teammate can just finish it off wherever they leave it from. The amount of creativity we saw from these two-man plays was simply mind-blowing. It was no longer just a decision of, do I pass this or do I solo play, like it had been for so long. The idea of faking for your teammate opened up a whole new avenue for plays that defenses clearly struggled against, because it's something they just aren't quite accustomed to yet. Which leads me to what I think this means for the future meta of this game. These two-man plays have always been somewhat deadly, but now that they're even more dangerous with the added recent creativity, I think we'll start to see teams build their entire styles around this particular way of scoring. I'm sure we're even already starting to see it. On offense, this means teams will start their attacks with these two-man plays specifically in mind. Instead of starting a patient three-man rotation with the goal of breaking down the defense through bumps, demos, and solo plays, there will probably be an even bigger emphasis on counterattacks. If you think about it, it's a lot easier and less risky. The whole point of bump rotations is to break down the defense after having pressure for a while, but you can only do that by driving all the way near their goal and putting yourself pretty far out of the play. With counterattacks, you don't even need to break down the defense. They're already broken down because they're in the process of trying to recover back. So you don't need to send an extra player forward if you don't want to. If you start your counterattack and it doesn't work out and the defense reaches a point where they're completely comfortable in rotation, it honestly might become tactically more viable to allow them to break out of their half a little bit. So they push out a little more and you wait to start another counterattack. Let's look at when version 1 swept FaZe Clan in the group stage. For those that don't know, in round 1, version 1 upset FaZe Clan by dominantly sweeping them and holding them to only 2 goals for an entire best of 5 series. These are the stats for game 1 for time spent in each team's defensive third. For V1, they spent a considerably large amount of time on defense, while FaZe Clan didn't. But yet, V1 still won this game by putting an emphasis on counterattacks rather than constant pressure. Let's look at game 2. Not quite as polarizing this time, but still, V1 was on defense noticeably more. In game 3, I mean, just see for yourself. V1 was on defense almost all game, and they still won, again, from their deadly counterattack pushes. It's truly brilliant. Most of the time when it comes to playstyles, it's not really about bringing something completely new to the table, but rather about which pieces of the puzzle you emphasize the most. So while no one is saying counterattacks and two-man plays are new, the way V1 and many of these top teams have been emphasizing them lately absolutely is. In the series where V1 dominated both FaZe Clan and Team Queso in the group stage, they played 7 total games, dropping only 1 of them against these top teams. If you were to guess, how many of those 7 games did V1 have more shots than their opponents? The answer? 0. V1 were outshot by their opponents every single game. Where they looked most dominant was where they played the least amount of offense. A total opposite of what you'd expect. Because in their second series against FaZe Clan later on in the playoffs, they actually outshot FaZe in 3 out of the 7 games in this series. So they had a lot more pressure than before, but they ended up losing this time. So if a bunker down style like this can turn a middle of the pack team in their region into a top 6 team in the world in such a short amount of time, I would not be surprised to see other professional teams start to emphasize counterattacks the same way V1 has. So that's my personal analysis. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you next week.